we head to the Xfinity Mobile call-in line and speak to the man who just spoke to the Eagles in the losing locker room for the final time this season. E.J. Smith, let's hear from your notebook.
Let's go straight into it.
Uh-oh, you're muted again.
I'm not muted. I am not muted.
It was Lindsay. Go ahead.
Not muted.
It was not you.
So first and foremost, I figured I should set the scene for the Eagles locker room. We get into the locker room, and Jalen Hurts, a dejected Jalen Hurts, is walking around the locker room with his hands on his hips, shaking his head, as A.J. Brown greets a handful of receivers and tight ends, saying his goodbyes as he walks out of the locker room. He did not speak with reporters. He was dressed by the time that we got in there, made a very quick exit. But yeah, just a really despondent locker room. It felt like it was still setting in. Really, honestly, that a lot of the things that had plagued them throughout the season really came back to bite them in this game. Next, I think it's important to update our listeners and viewers that Nick Sirianni said after the game that there will be time to evaluate everything when asked about Kevin Patullo's future as the Eagles offensive coordinator. He did not want to answer anything definitively when it comes to Patullo. A lot of players gave Kevin Patullo a vote of confidence after this game. But yeah, nothing definitive from Nick Sirianni. And then finally, I thought that this quote from Jordan Mailata was really a good encapsulation of what's gone on with the Eagles offense over the course of the season. He just said that it finally just dawned on them that they weren't a good team this year. And I think specifically on offense, I think that rings true that a lot of the issues that, they were maybe a little bit more willing to explain away or say they were close to fixing. He said that they just never really were able to figure those things out. So, those are the things that stood out from the locker room. I definitely have a lot more that we can get into, but yeah, those three things really stood out to me in my notebook here.
All right, well, let's start with Nick. And you have been in a lot of these press conferences. What is your read on, what is coming after the way that he answered that question about Kevin Patullo?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Kevin Patullo is back as offensive coordinator at this point. I don't know if it'll happen quickly, if it will be the type of thing that drags out. But honestly, they're going to need to be active in finding a replacement if they do decide to move on from him. And I think it's hard to envision a scenario in which you could talk yourself into him coming back. I think that argument probably starts with continuity and the value that might have to Jalen Hurts. But I do think that when you look at the way the Eagles offense performed, I think I think the one thing I want to say is that it doesn't seem like it's going to be quite that simple. If it's a different offensive coordinator next season, I think there are still a lot of components and, a lot of the main characters on this offense that will make it a tough needle to thread. But I do think when you look at it, this is the easiest lever to pull, and I think it makes sense that they would do that.
Does anybody in the organization have ties to Brian Daboll?
Yes, Nick Sirianni does. Jalen Hurts does. Yeah. So they definitely have those touch points if they want them. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about the locker room, EJ. What was the mood from guys? And when you hear someone say we weren't a very good team, what do you take from that?
Yeah, it was an emotional locker room. I think that was what stood out most. Dallas Goedert was very clearly emotional after the game, as was Devontae Smith. Dallas Goedert said when he caught that pass on that fourth down late in the game, he was convinced that they were going to win the game. So he was a little shell-shocked afterward. Didn't want to talk too much about his future. I think we'll get that later or, honestly, early next week. But, Devontae Smith, you could just kind of see it in his face, like the pain of losing. This is a guy who's obviously incredibly competitive, has won a lot in his career, and you could really see it, like I said, kind of written all over his face as he answered questions, the frustration that was kind of readily apparent there. So, an emotional locker room. We heard from Landon Dickerson. I thought what he said was one of the more eyebrow-raising things, talking about his health. He said he played through a lot this season. And, I asked him, Landon is a guy who has played through a lot of injuries in his career. He's played through torn ACL, come back from torn ACLs, serious ankle injuries. He obviously, he's had the meniscus all this year, played through injury last year as well. I asked him how this season compared, and he said, are we in overtime? Can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay, he said it was shitty, and he was very terse about it. The thing that was concerning to me was, him saying he's not sure if he's going to make a full recovery this offseason. Asked about if he was confident that he'd be able to return to that level of play. He said, if I knew that answer, I'd feel a whole lot better. So definitely, some long-term concern there. This is a guy who's dealt with a lot of injury, and I don't know, maybe it's like him being a realist, but it did stand out to me that because he's been somebody who's played through and made it back from some serious injuries in the past.
Was he asked whether he feels like in retrospect, time off would have done him good?
No, he wasn't.
Okay.
I think that'll be a good question for locker room clean out. He was pretty short on everything today, though. So, he said that he felt like he really let his team down this season with the way that he played. But I think, again, it's pretty understandable from an outsider's perspective what he had to go through to play this season.
What did you make of the AJ situation?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, AJ not talking after the game. He's not doing himself any favors in this, with the way that the game went. Obviously, had the costly drop on third down. Thought there was some, sorry, Vinny, to bring this up, but there was some irony in Alshon Jeffrey being in attendance for that drop. But obviously, Dallas Goedert kind of bails him out the next play there. But no, we didn't hear from AJ. Nick said that they're both emotional. It was just an emotional moment on the sideline. Nick said that they've been through every emotion possible together, right? Happiness, sadness, screaming at each other. But I mean, it's definitely, depending on how this offseason goes, that exchange could be part of the lasting image of, what could be AJ's last season with the Eagles.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
wow.
No, I mean, it's just crazy it's crazy and not crazy that we found ourselves here. Because in one vein, it's obviously the most expensive offense in the NFL. You look at the talent that they have. It shouldn't have been this hard for this group. We said it all season. It never should have been this difficult for them to string together drives and put up points, But at the same time, Jordan Mailata said afterward, like, he's tired of saying the same thing since he felt like he said the same thing every week, because the issues that plagued them in this game were the issues that plagued them in week 9 and week 11 and week 14 and week 18, or not week 18, week 17.
Preach.
So these have been issues. Jalen Hurts said in October, some things don't get you until they get you. And it got the Eagles offense today. The issues that we saw all season really caught up to them. And I think that, you saw them coming to grips with that after the game.
One of those issues, which plagued them all season, was an inability to get plays in on time. They had to waste a timeout on fourth down before the final offensive play of the game. EJ, what did Nick say about that?
Yeah, so he said that was about setting up a good play. That wasn't, trying to avoid a delay of game penalty. It was about getting a look against that 49ers defense. And I guess I would say, the heat of coming out of the locker room, hearing from people, I'll be curious to hear what you guys say. I sort of understand the logic of, this is probably your best chance to win the game. But at the same time, it obviously cost them a chance to get the ball back. I think in the context of what the Eagles offenses look like, getting the ball back with potentially 20 seconds, whatever it would have been, probably not a high percentage chance. But that was his explanation. It wasn't to avoid a penalty. It was because they wanted to get a look and see what the 49ers were in defensively. Yeah,
I think it was a bad move, but I think it was not the worst move they made on that drive. I thought it was, was just, and as Fran pointed out, like a season of wasting chances to run a 2-minute drill came back to bite them. They didn't know what they were doing when they got down there.
Absolutely. No, and, Nick said after the game, just piggybacking off of like things that we've seen from them all year, Nick said after the game he didn't feel like they were conservative in the second half. I mean, maybe the word isn't conservative, but you see some of these decisions to run on second and long.
So many second down runs. Unbelievable.
And first down runs. Jordan Mailata said just a few minutes ago, like the 49ers started to really key in on the Eagles run game. They started rolling a safety into the box, committing bodies into the run game. And it's like, I understand that these guys say it's an execution issue, but at the same time, at some point, the predictability on early downs, the obsession with being on schedule that we've heard from Kevin Patullo all season, that caught up to them today, because of the fact that teams can key in, on what the Eagles do, especially in those first down runs and some of those second and long situations where they're just not aggressive. So again, it's a philosophical thing, and I think that something we'll unpack in the coming weeks is whether or not like a change at offensive coordinator changes the fact that you've got a head coach and a quarterback who are wired that way. But I do think, again, like these are things we talked about all season. It is confounding that they weren't able to fix them.
Here's a quick little stat for you on that front. On first and second down in this game, in the first 3 quarters, so before they had a chance, they really had to pass. First 3 quarters, first and second down, they ran the ball 60% of the time. That's the second highest rate of the season for them, besides the Raiders game, which they won 31-0. That's how they approached this game.
It's funny because in the first quarter, when they got the run game going, I thought, is this going to be a curse at the end of the game or in the second half of the game if they start to struggle because of the fact that it felt like they were really committed to what they got going in the first half. And, it's stuff we talked about all year. It's feel for a game. It's kind of reading a situation out. They didn't do a good enough job with that. So, no, I think they need to make changes on the coaching staff, but I also think, honestly, I think they need to look hard at the offensive line and probably have to make some tough decisions on guys, because I think that if you're going to move forward with Nick Sirianni and Jalen, which I think you do, you have to have a dominant offensive line to make it work. Philosophically, we saw what it looks like when you don't have that high-level play up front.
Any other plays in particular from this game, EJ, that will live with you as the season heads to the offseason?
It's a good question. None jump out to me. I'm sure if I look through my notes, I've got plays in bold. I guess really the thing that stood out to me the most is after Quinyon Mitchell's first interception, the fact that they weren't able to capitalize on that.
Unbelievable.
3 and out.
Next time, yeah, 3 and out after that. And then the second one to only get 3 points out of it. And what was it, like a 10-play, 23-yard drive or something like that?
Yeah.
To get in the field goal range. Yeah. So I think those two, because especially Nick Sirianni harps so much on winning the turnover battle, and how that determines what the Eagles' record is in those games. But you saw that only works if you're capitalizing on those turnovers, if you're aggressive off of those turnovers, and the Eagles clearly weren't. So, it's like, to me, that stands out the most. I know there will be other plays, but for me, I think that the fact that they weren't an opportunistic offense, they really weren't, go back to what Jordan Mailata said, they weren't a good offense this year. They weren't a good group. And it's just confounding when you look at the amount of talent that they had.
The one that's going to kill me, EJ, was the Cam Jurgens penalty after the big Jalen Hurts run, because it just seemed like they were about to walk into the end zone there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't get a great look, or I didn't get a good replay on the Jumbotron of that holding call, but they had a lot of players talked about penalties after the game, but a lot of offenses go through penalties. It feels like there's just something about this group that when they do get behind the sticks, they just put their heads down or they tuck tail, and they just they wave the white flag in a way that just defies the players that they have.
And when you pound your chest about attention to detail as one of your, carrying factors, I'm sorry. They've been bad at attention to detail all season long. They've had terrible penalties that have waylaid them. They've had bad decision making. They've been really bad in game management stuff. I'm sorry, just because you say it doesn't make it true.
Yeah, no, I mean, there were definitely a handful of instances tonight where I'm thinking, I wonder what Jeffrey Lurie must be thinking watching this unfold, some of the decision making. And that's another part of players will say it's execution. Because again, players are really defensive of Kevin Patullo tonight, and I understand why. But at some point, a lack of execution could be on the coaching staff as well. At some point it's were you drilling this during the week? Because we've seen these guys play at a high level. I don't know if it's as easy to say they just stopped playing at a high level. I think it's bigger than that.
And again, I said this before, EJ, but I don't believe that this is all Kevin Patullo's fault, obviously. But I do think at this point it would be cruel to Kevin Patullo to keep him here in the same position.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, he has been the antagonist for a lot of fans and been under a lot of scrutiny. And I want to make it clear for our viewers, I cover the guy every week, and he's not a bad guy. He's a nice guy.
I like him.
So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's I agree with you. I think that some of the criticism this season has been out of hand, but obviously the thing that happened with his house, people throwing eggs in his house, that stuff is obviously, it's obviously terrible, right? And it's, but I do think at the end of a season like this, it's about accountability, and it's about figuring out how they fix it. And I do think that he's part of how they fix it.
All right, EJ. Before I ask you what you're going to write about, what is your sort of epitaph on the 2025 Eagles season? How will you remember this group?
I'm going to remember this group for a lot of what we just spent 10 minutes talking about. It's sometimes I feel bad when I come on with you guys, because it's man, I really talked to most of the offensive guys. I didn't hear from the defensive guys quite as much, but it's we spent months trying to make sense of what was going on with that side of the ball. And I think that, when I look back at this season, it's going to be a wasted year because of that group. The Eagles defense played at such a high level. Even tonight, Like, obviously they had some shaky moments, but they really tried to will this team over the finish line in the same way that they did for most of the second half of the year. But at some point, that Eagles offense, the issues that plagued them, the issues that they could not figure out, I think that's really what's going to stand out for me looking back on this year. So, again, they got to get it fixed, because I still think they're going to have a lot of talent in the short to medium term here. But I don't know. It's going to be a difficult fix, in my opinion, to get this offense back on track.
EJ, I asked Bo, how many turkeys are you putting on AJ Brown wearing a different uniform next year?
Yeah, honestly, probably I think I said 65 before we went in the locker room. I think I'd keep it around 65. I don't want to overreact to AJ saying his goodbyes and leaving hastily out of the locker room, but I just think that, the way that this season has gone for him, I remember having a conversation with him mid-season where he said I'm starting not to care anymore. I think I don't know. It might be a natural time for both sides to benefit from, a divorce here. And it's crazy to say that, he's a great player, and the Eagles are not usually in the business of trading a great player like that. But, with the way that this year went, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to leave. And, I think the Eagles might need to reimagine what they are offensively anyway.
All right, if you are with us this deep into the PHLY Eagles postgame show, a reminder that we are live every weekday at 2 o'clock talking birds. There's obviously going to be a lot to talk about over the next week, over the next coming months, but you should also become a diehard, and now is the best chance to do it. You can get a deal for $36 for the whole year to read E.J. Smith's coverage of the Eagles, the coverage from the guys on the Sixers and the Flyers. You also get access to Fran Duffy's draft guide, which is unbelievable. Detailed reports on everybody in the draft as we turn our attention there. But
oh man, draft season
tomorrow morning, you'll be able to read E.J. Smith writing about this game. What will we be able to read?
Trying to make sense of how the Eagles season ended here. I think that it happened fast. Like you talking about draft season, just like I can't believe that we are officially in draft season. And obviously we've got probably some news to sort out over the next couple of days, but no, I think it's just going to be about, how the Eagles got here and where do they go from here. So,
all right, EJ, thank you so much for joining us on the Xfinity Mobile call-in line. See you on the show tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
All right, guys. Talk soon.
See you, EJ.
Great job this year, EJ.